start filling in. So let me do this.
Is recording already started?
Yes.
When you record like that, are you able to go back and edit so we can cut out the, chit chat at the beginning?
I'm not. I'm sure there are
ways to do
tech-savvy folks that can, but that's not me.
Yeah, because I was thinking about the Q&A that we did. It's like, well,
I know. We that one we had a lot of chit chat. We were new. COVID was kind of new, and we were new to doing things. We're getting a little bit better where we're not broadcasting or starting the recording till we're closer to go time.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about last Thursday because we were waiting a while for people to come, and we're talking, and so I was wondering. I said, well, if we're recording all of this, is somebody gonna be able to go and crop that out?
I think that one. I don't think I hit record till maybe 2 minutes before we actually got going. I could be wrong. I have to go back and watch it. But.
Yeah, that's okay. As long as you had manual control as opposed to it just starting up on its own. I guess over the course of the presentation, folks will get a chance to introduce themselves. So I'm not going to make you go through all this, Tiffany. Tell us who you are in your life story, because it'll probably come up. But I gather you guys work together.
Yes, we work together.
Fair enough.
Folks are starting to arrive. We got about 14 folks with us right now. And Tiffany, I was telling Catherine and Doreen right before I logged into here, I looked to see and there was like 235 folks registered. So the numbers have gone up a little bit more today. So this must be a hot topic for folks.
I'm gonna say if we get half that, we'll be doing good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's always more that register than attend.
Right.
I do the same thing. I'm like, I want to see that, and I sign up and I register, and then I look at my day and go, something's got to go, and sometimes it's the one I registered for.
All right, so we got something in the chat, question about will it be recorded, and the answer to that is yes.
Yes.
Tiffany, I was going to say, to the extent I can while you're talking, I'll put a resource link in the chat. For people if they, just we want to follow up, so to speak, with what you're talking about, I can put a web link.
Okay. Because I'm sure they're going to be asking for documents or.
Right, and then I'll try to, I've got our website pulled up here, so I can, I can put in links to whatever.
Let's see. It's brighter, but I don't think it makes me look brighter. Maybe a little bit. It's like actually clear. I need to get one of those ring lights like the folks on TV use, so you can illuminate yourself appropriately.
Gotcha.
Jamie, give us a call.
Yeah, I just saw Jamie's question. Yeah, definitely give us a call. And you're not alone in that the virtual learning is not working for your child, and so we can give you some guidance on how to communicate. I need a phone number, please. Okay, you can give us a call at 704-892-1321.
All right, I'll type that into the chat.
Amy, do you want us to try to answer the questions? I see a question already for SEAA, which I can attempt to keep up with that, or Tiffany and I both can when she's.
If it's going to be part of your presentation, I would suggest just kind of waiting and including it, because otherwise y'all going to be jumping it all over the place.
There you go. That's helpful.
Oh, I'm about to give you my daughter's phone number. Oh, my Lord. Wow. It shows where my head was. Okay, backspace. So.
I'm going to give it just a couple more minutes. It's 7, but folks are still showing up, so we'll let them get settled in before we get started.
I typed it into the chat. If you can access the chat, Jamie.
I think, Doreen, it's because you went to all
Susanna.
panelists, and Jamie, I don't think, is a panelist.
Okay, I didn't do to everybody. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's probably why I can't see it.
Let's do that. Panelists and attendees.
Yeah.
Sorry, we'll do this again.
Learning as we go.
Well, paying attention to details, and you know that's not my strong suit.
There you go. Yep, I see you did it. So it goes to the attendees now. So very good.
Yeah, and I guess I should have put the ESAC thing, but somebody just wondered what that random number is. They'll ask.
I'll do a little time check. 7:01. We've got 38 participants right now. So 39. I'm gonna give it one more minute, folks. And then I'm gonna look at these alerts about these flash floods that are coming our way. Looks like North Carolina is gonna get hit with some heavy rains.
When it rains really heavy, I'll get this little pool that kind of collects off of my deck. And my street name is Elsinore, so I refer to it as Lake Elsinore when it shows up, you know, and it rains. So I look out in the middle of the night and it's like, yeah, Lake Elsinore's back. I suspect we're going to have a revisit this time.
All right, we've got 48 folks. I think I'll go ahead and get started. We are recording this, and so if somebody joins late and they want the recording, we can always send that to them. We are not offering closed captioning tonight, but we will have a recording done on this, and if for some reason somebody needed the transcript, we can look into getting that done as well. Just saw the chat box light up. Do you have us muted? Yes. Typically when we do our webinars, we don't have the attendees have the option to, we can't hear you. We just utilize the chat box and the Q&A box. I've been to some webinars where the audience can, and sometimes it can be a little chaotic.
Yeah, if you got a very small group of people, then you know that's sometimes manageable. But
yeah.
For you folks, we had over 200 people sign up for this event. Probably we won't get that many attending, but if you can imagine 200 people all with their mics live,
yeah,
it would not be pretty. Dogs barking in the background, all kinds of interesting things happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you have questions, go ahead. You know, as we're talking, you can go ahead and put them in the Q&A box. We know there's one in there right now, and that is going to be answered a little bit later in the presentation. But that would be a good spot to put your questions if you just, you know, have something like you know, where you want to chime in or say, yeah, that's true, or I believe that, or I know that, or that's what happened to me. You can throw that kind of stuff in the chat box. But we will go ahead and, were you going to say something, Doreen?
Yeah, I was going to say, if folks have individual situations that, you know, they're wanting help with, this is not the opportunity for that, really. And the best thing will be to contact ECAC. Our phone number does appear at the end of the presentation, does it? Did you include that in there?
Yeah. And
okay,
everybody that is attending will get a follow-up email that will have links to any of the resources that we mentioned and contact information for ECAC. and NCSEAA. That's a long acronym that I have to pace myself to say.
Yeah, maybe they have a short way of saying it.
Right.
That'll make it easy.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I just want to thank everybody for joining us tonight for our webinar, North Carolina School Options for Students with Disabilities. It definitely is it's an important subject, and it seems to be a hot topic right now, especially in light of COVID, as folks are, wondering what else is available to them. And so we are glad that you are here and joining us. And I'm just going to take a quick minute to introduce ourselves. I'll start with myself. My name is Amy Combs, and I'm one of the parent educators here at ECAC, which is the Exceptional Children's Assistance Center. I'm currently sitting in Mecklenburg County, just kind of right on the Iredell-Mecklenburg County line. And I'm joined tonight by my colleague, Doreen, and I'll let her go ahead and introduce herself.
Hey, I'm Doreen Bird. I am the lead parent educator with ECAC. I've been with ECAC for 22 years, and I'm a parent of a child with a disability. Actually, both of my children have learning disabilities and attention deficit disorder. They're now young adults, so we've sort of been through this path. But gosh, baby, I remember things that people said to me when they were in kindergarten, so it's still very much part of our being.
And we have the pleasure of having Catherine and Tiffany from the North Carolina State Education Assistance Authority joining us, and I'll let them go ahead and introduce themselves. I have Catherine. My stack has me, Doreen, Catherine, then Tiffany, so we'll go Catherine next.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Catherine Marker. Thanks for having us here, Amy and Doreen. I'm the director of the division at SEAA that administers the K-12 programs. SEAA does a lot of different work about helping North Carolina pay for education. So we'll introduce you real briefly to our agency, not that you want too much information about that. You're interested in the Disabilities Grant and the ESA. And Tiffany is the program manager. She will introduce herself, but she'll do most of the presenting tonight, and I'll try to pass you some resources while she's talking.
And yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Tiffany Jada. As Catherine mentioned, I am one of the K-12 program managers in our Grants Training Outreach Division at SEAA. Left off two initials.
That is so much easier to say when you drop the NC first.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. Learn something there.
It sure is. So a little backstory on how this concept or this webinar came about is, for one thing, I've been at ECAC for about 6 years, and there was so many things that I didn't know that I wish I would have known, especially when my son was younger. When I started here, my son was a junior in high school, but it was like, well, I didn't even know this existed. And so, I've kind of always had it at the forefront of my mind that, we need to get more information out about this, not just about options that are available to families, but also important things they need to know, like if you choose this, it might mean that, or you could lose that, or here's one way you could get this, kind of a thing. And so it certainly was something that was kind of my mind, like, oh, we should, get this information out to families, and especially in light of COVID and how that's turned everybody's world upside down. I started seeing more and more posts in some of the moms groups that I'm in on Facebook, folks saying, I don't think I'm going to return my child to school. I think I might just homeschool. I'm going to pull my kid out. And not, and people saying, oh yeah, it's just easy, you can do that. Just tell me you're not sending your kid back. And I was like panicking, like, no, there's more to it. There's things that people need to know. And so I thought, well, certainly we're seeing more and more people are wanting to know what their options are, what is out there, how do I access some of those options. And so it just felt like a good idea to get this information packaged and presented not only just by us, but by the folks at the NCSEAA. I am getting better at that. And so what's important for folks to know is that this is not a webinar. When we talk about school options, we're not here, we don't rank or recommend specific schools. This is not what it's about. It's really about getting information into the hands of families so that they can make informed decisions for their child. Last year, when the new application process opened for the Disabilities Grant and Opportunity Scholarship and the Education Savings Account, I posted it on ECAC social media page. I'm the social media lead, so I said, hey, you know, folks, this is out there. This is available for you. And some folks went off, you know, and they said, why would you, you know, ECAC being federally funded by the U.S. Department of Education Office of Special Education Programs, why would you even promote an option where students wouldn't be protected or have all their provisions under IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act? And I was, you know, on the keyboard pounding away saying, look, this isn't recommending that folks pull their child from the public school. It's not like that at all. It's just giving folks information that maybe have that on their radar to say, hey, there's a program out there. If you are looking to homeschool or enroll your child in a private school, there's funds out there that a lot of folks haven't known about. And then when COVID did happen, Catherine or Tiffany, correct me if I'm wrong, I think your deadline was like the end of March?
Was actually
suddenly we were getting some calls of some folks that were getting furious with the school because they needed these evaluations or these eligibility papers from the school in order to meet that deadline. And certainly we know that deadlines became a huge issue for all districts because they weren't able to do their face-to-face evaluations. And so we had people saying, I need that. And, you know, we're having to say, chances are you're not going to get it in time, that the schools really have their hands tied right now as far as completing evaluations, and plus they get 90 days. And so in thinking about what had happened in the spring and knowing that there is a 90-day timeline to determine, you know, to go through the IEP process, it made sense, like, we'll go ahead and do this in September so that folks that don't have an IEP yet but want to explore private school options for their child with a disability will have everything done in time that when the application process opens back up, they can go ahead and apply if they want to. So that's just me rambling a little bit on how my brain works and how I said, hey, I have an idea. Let's go ahead and do this. And so when I reached out to Catherine and Tiffany, they said, yeah, we're happy to join you. So I was very excited to have them here to hear it straight from them on how the program works and all the ins and outs. So these are our learning objectives for this evening. My hope is that all the participants will be able to identify school options available in North Carolina, and then also recognize the obligations of schools and parents under the North Carolina Compulsory Attendance Law, which is very important because truancy folks do knock on people's doors. We've had calls from many of those. Also, hoping that you'll be able to distinguish which school options are covered under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and be able to list the 3 programs that North Carolina offers that provide financial assistance to eligible K-12 private school students.
Okay, we always spend a few minutes at the beginning of each presentation to let people know who the heck we are as an organization, because generally speaking, there's at least some folks who are here that may not be familiar with ECAC. I'll try to keep it very brief. The role that we're a private nonprofit organization that actually does a variety of things. But the role that we're most known for is our position as North Carolina's Parent Training and Information Center. We get a grant from the U.S. Department of Education. It actually comes through the federal special education law, and there's counterparts to us in every state, so that basically parents can have an independent source of information regarding special ed and what the rights are and processes and help with trying to navigate the system, et cetera. But we are totally, very much a parent-run organization. Our board of directors consists of mostly parents. All of the parent educators, if you were to call our office requesting help, all of us are parents of kids with special needs ourselves. And even a lot of our behind-the-scenes staff are parents with kids with special needs. And that does have some value, for a lot of parents when they're calling, to at least be able to talk to somebody that halfway understands it from that perspective. Even if your kids have different challenges, we know what it's like to be out there trying to make things happen for your child and trying to get their needs met. But we do have a couple of other, some other projects that we do. We are partners in the North Carolina Deafblind Project, which serves those children that have a combination of vision impairments and hearing impairments. They don't have to be totally deaf or totally blind, but if they have just those two impairments together, that poses a significant obstacle in terms of them being able to access information and access their world. And it's a unique sort of challenge. And so there's a project that we're partners with the Department of Public Instruction as well as East Carolina University to not only meet the needs of the families, but also provide technical assistance and consultation and whatever to staff that are working with them, professionals that are working with them. We have a small part of the North Carolina State Improvement Project. Basically, North Carolina has requested some additional funds from the federal government to help improve the quality of services that they're providing for students with disabilities. A lot of that takes the form of professional development, but we also have some parent and family focused activities around the same areas that they're targeting, whether it's literacy or math or positive behavior supports, whichever thing is being done with the professional educators, is we also sort of run counterpart activities with the parents. The North Carolina Infant Toddler Program, now Amy, that one you probably know better than I am, is what our role is with that.
So we have a contract with the North Carolina Early Intervention Program that serves infants and toddlers with disabilities up to age 3. And so some of the work that we are doing with them is focused on family leadership and also on educating families about the transition process. So when they exit early intervention and that transition to possible school-based services. And so we are currently working on updating some materials on early intervention and that transition process, and also are looking at doing some kind of parents as leaders type training, getting folks to think about sharing their story, telling their story in a way that might impact systems, both locally and at the state level and, maybe even at the federal level. And so really kind of getting those folks on board with maybe, serving on decision-making groups, things of that nature.
Okay, thank you, Amy.
Mm-hmm.
The Lens Project is one that we've got some funding through a private foundation. And the sort of short version of it is that we're trying to promote equity, particularly racial equity in various institutions, certainly schools and organizations. And we're trying to develop a model of how that diversity instruction and I guess gearing folks up to address those issues can be created and distributed. So I don't work directly with their project, which is why I'm stumbling over the words here. But the primary focus is trying to come up with some solutions around it. And obviously it's a very timely topic with what's going on in our country today.
Yeah, and it's a super new grant that we just got, and so we're just starting the legwork on that.
All right, you're up next. I think. Actually, it's not, but next slide. All right. One of the things that we need to sort of establish before we do anything else is the fact that kids have to be in school if they're between the ages of 7 up through age 15. So basically, once they turn to 16, then they're no longer required to attend school. But 7 through the end of 15, they have to be in school some kind of way. And if you're a parent, a guardian, anybody who has legal responsibility for a child, you are responsible for making sure that they are attending school. Otherwise, you can be held accountable. And that's where the sort of buzz about truancy comes into play. And even though our schools start at, with kindergartners being 5-year-olds and whatnot, so children aren't required to actually attend school at that young of an age, but clearly they'll be at a disadvantage if they just show up at age 7. So, but the idea is that they have to be in school somewhere, but there are choices for how that happens.
Yeah, and I was going to mention on this subject, we have gotten calls, and I've gotten quite a few over the years regarding this, where parents are getting really frustrated, especially those parents that have a child that maybe has intense, school anxiety, school phobia, or they're really medically complex and they're missing a lot of school, and they're getting these warnings from, and some folks have even had the truancy officer knock on their door, and some folks have had to go to court over truancy, where, they're just feeling, singled out or attacked by the administrators. And what's important about this compulsory attendance law is not only is there an obligation that parents enroll their child if they're within this age group, but the schools have an obligation to, there's kind of a system that they have to follow. They got to send a letter after so many days, like saying, hey, your kid's missed a lot of school, let me know what's going on, and then there's another letter, but after so many times, then they actually have an obligation to reach out to the Division of Social Services. And so that's, one time I was in an IEP meeting, and that was a huge issue, the attendance, and when I explained that to the mom, the administrator said, thank you. Thank you for explaining that it's, I get it, but I still have this obligation. I'm bound by this law too, and so we have to follow through with our steps. And I'm, thinking about my own son, he has autism, he's 23 now, but back when he was in kindergarten, he missed a lot of school over stuff that a typical child might not, and it was stuff that I wasn't about to take him to the doctors for, and I can remember, he had a lot of ear infections, and so it was like, yeah, I could send him, but he's going to be miserable, and the folks working with him are going to be miserable. It's not going to be productive. But he had a bout of chapped lips that were so bad, and he was so miserable. And my son was like the most tactile, defensive kid you'd ever want to meet. Huge sensory issues. There was no way we were going to get Vaseline or chapstick or anything, and he wasn't going to listen to us about stop licking your lips. And so he missed it, and I would just email the school and say, look, Joey's got really bad chapped lips. You don't want to deal with him today. It's not going to be good for anybody. And I remember at one point the principal was awesome. And she called me. She said, look, I'm just going to let you know, I'm mailing you this letter because I have to. I get it. I know what's going on. Don't panic, but I'm required to send you this letter. And it was kind of, the warning letter, like, hey, heads up, you're on our radar, for this truancy. But nothing ever became of it. But just knowing that, they have an obligation too. And so if you're, getting those letters or, folks are warning it, it's because they have to.
All right, next slide, Ms. Amy.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we've established that children have to be in school, but there's a variety of choices available to them. When you look at your traditional public school systems, obviously they range in size tremendously from our very large districts in Wade County and Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. We have city districts. The larger school districts will have more options even within their system oftentimes, as far as magnet programs. If you got a high school kid, there may be early college kind of programs. I know Wake County, and there may be some others, have options for calendar as far as, signing on for year-round school versus your traditional sort of 9-month calendar year. So there certainly are, frequently going to be some options available within your school district. And if somebody's just not happy with their kid's current, situation or current school, that would be something that you would want to at least explore from the standpoint of understanding, again, making informed decisions means finding out what your choices are. And so that's something that may be, as we talked about, missing deadlines and things like that. If your school system does have magnet programs, typically those application deadlines are very early, like, maybe February or something in the school year. So if you wait until May to ask those questions, it's going to be too late. All right, then we also have public charter schools. Now, the thing about public charter schools is that they do have to follow all of the same laws that regular public schools do, but they're given some freedoms that other schools don't. For instance, their staffing, they don't have to have, 100% certified teachers. They can have a significant percentage of their teachers not being actually certified, which has its pluses and minuses. You can bring in people that have, expertise in a field, but not necessarily a teaching degree. That was one of the arguments for doing that. The charter schools also sometimes have differences in their curriculum or teaching method. They generally have to follow the standard course of study for the state. So kids are going to be learning grade level stuff if they're in a public charter school. And the laws as far as the special education laws, the educational records laws, and et cetera, they all still apply to them. But, it just gives a measure of choice for families as well. If you don't want your, traditional district, you can look at other options without totally stepping away from the public forum. And then we've got private schools, which run the gamut. You got everything from your little church school to your major long-standing, private schools that have all, grade levels and lovely facilities and the whole nine, points in between. And some of them have specialties in terms of, again, their focus. There are some private schools that target students with disabilities specifically, but they're few and far between, to be honest. And most of them are going to be around the larger metropolitan areas. So again, a lot of families that are in the smaller communities won't necessarily have those specialty schools. But there may very well be schools that, can serve your child well. So you want to, inquire about what's going on and what's available. And certainly a question to ask, if you're sort of just teetering and trying to investigate, is asking about what kind of support services they have available. Some of them do offer supplemental instruction. Some of them have, will allow private therapists, physical therapists or speech therapists or whatever to come on the campus and serve the kids. So you got a wide array of what is available there. So again, you just want to be an informed consumer and ask good questions so that you can, make your own judgment call about whether or not you think a school is going to be a good fit. When I get calls from parents in our office who are basically, again, looking for choices and they're ready to kind of ditch the public schools, one of the things I will say to them, and they'll get, the SEAA people will get into more about what these grant programs are about, but there is a program that's specifically for students with disabilities, and on it, they have a chart that will show whether or not a school accepts that grant. In my mind, the fact that they accept that grant, I mean, they're acknowledging that they're willing to serve at least some, students with disabilities. Now, it doesn't mean they're going to serve everybody, but that at least, some of their student population are likely to be students with disabilities. So those would be the ones I'd start knocking on the door first, rather than kind of randomly picking somebody to look into. So just a tip, save some time. Then you got homeschools. North Carolina has an awful lot of homeschool families. And in North Carolina, homeschools are considered to be private schools. So with regard to a lot of the rules and certainly how they interface with students with disabilities and being able to access services and stuff, they're put in the same pot, private schools and homeschools. And I do believe we have a slide coming up that goes into a little bit more detail about the homeschools. I think that may be the next one. Is it, Amy?
Oops. No, but I can go to that one.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Okay, so you want to do it in space? Okay, we can.
It's however you want to do it. If you're ready, I don't want you to lose momentum. If you want me to do that slide, we'll do that.
Yeah, let's do that one, because then when we have the other conversation about private schools and people know that, okay, that includes the homeschool people. Just, again, as Amy said, it's not uncommon for us to get calls from people that are saying that they think that they'd rather, or at least they're considering homeschooling their child, but they don't understand necessarily what the process is or what that's involved. There is an Office of Non-Public Education at the state level that you have to get registered through. So you would contact them, request a registration packet. I believe that now a fair amount of that can be done online, but you do have to submit evidence that the person in charge of the school has a high school diploma or the equivalent thereof. Frankly, the bar is not set terribly high, so if you got a high school diploma, yes, you can open up your own homeschool. And once it's approved, there are some expectations that the school is going to operate on some sort of a regular schedule, that attendance is going to be maintained. At least once a year, the child has to be administered some sort of achievement test, academic achievement test. Nobody comes in and checks those test results. That I think is a way of them making sure that people have some information so they can kind of track their child's growth. So if they're not making the gains that somebody would hope, then they can know to make some adjustments or something like that. But generally, nobody's going to go in there and actually look at those scores. But it's, for your information, but you do have to do it. They have to also maintain, immunization records and such as that. So there are some some requirements, but it's, pretty liberal. And one thing that I'll just sort of throw in, because it's only when we exclusively talk about that, there's an organization called North Carolinians for Home Education that provides information and support to folks that are just exploring homeschooling or doing homeschooling. And if you go to their website, which is just NCHE I think they're .com, not a .org. You can find information about curriculum and things like that. They do some activities where different homeschools can get together. Some of it's statewide, some of it's regional. And actually within a lot of communities, there's homeschool sort of groups, that kind of are like-minded, and they may come sort of pull together their resources to maybe hire a music teacher, when one family may not have been able to afford to do that on their own. But if you get a group of schools, together, then they can, hire somebody for some specialty instruction, or operate even sport athletic teams that are allowed to compete as private schools are allowed to compete at the, with other high schools and such, if that's something that they're interested in doing. So anyway, that would be a good place if somebody is thinking about that to go for starter information as well.
Yeah, and I think it's important, if your child's just starting school and you choose to homeschool, make sure you go and submit that notice of intent, get your homeschool registered. If you are pulling your child from the public school, make sure you're communicating to them that I'm withdrawing my child and enrolling them in the homeschool, because if you just withdraw your child and you start doing this homeschool and you haven't registered, that compulsory attendance law can come into place, because if you haven't communicated with the public school, they're going to be saying he's not here, he's not here, he's not here, he's not here. We're going to send a letter, and it's just stuff that you can avoid if you do it, follow the proper steps.
Mm-hmm. And I will just kind of jump into I see this question come up in the chat. Somebody said, how do learning pods fall into that? The learning pods aren't considered home schools. They're basically just an arrangement that families have pulled together to say, okay, I need somebody to provide supervision and to assist my kids with their remote learning. So that's something, that you're certainly allowed to do as a parent. Just there's a whole lot of things that you can do as a parent. You don't need to be registered as a homeschool to work with your child on their academics. You still have your, a right to do that. So the pods would fall under that heading of this is your discretion to decide where you want your kid to park themselves. But it wouldn't be considered homeschooling. They would stay enrolled in the, their local schools, whichever schools they are.
All right, and so we're going to talk a little bit about the IDEA, or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which it's a federal law that requires each state to ensure that a free, appropriate public education is available to eligible children with disabilities that reside in their state. And so there is this obligation under IDEA, and we've got here the purpose, which is to ensure that all children with disabilities have available to them, again, a free, appropriate, notice public, I made that bold, education that emphasizes special education and related services. When we talk about related services, we're talking about, could be OT, PT, speech, it could be maybe they're getting some services from a visually impaired teacher, hearing impaired teacher, and those services are designed to meet their unique needs and prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living. And so when you're thinking about the IDEA and children that are parentally placed in a homeschool or a private school, it's important that folks understand that there are some limitations when it comes to IDEA for those students. Because the obligations from the local education agency or the local district are much less for those students. And so the best way to explain this is that each LEA gets, they have to use what would be called a proportionate share plan. So they have some funding set aside for those students that reside in their district that have been identified as having a disability or eligible for an IEP. And they can use those funds to serve those students through what is called a service plan. But those funds are very limited, and the school district has they get to say, here's how we're going to use this money. And so the services are typically significantly less than what a child would get under an IEP. And so seem to kind of see a trend. Most districts are taking that money that's in that pot and using it to provide speech therapy. And some districts are even taking that money and being real specific. We're only going to use it for speech therapy and only for students in this category. So I know one district where they said we're only going to use it for speech therapy and only for these kids that are eligible under the speech and language impairment category. And so, you know, there's a IDA applies a little bit to those kids that are in private school or homeschool, but there is no child that is getting going to keep their IEP and that. And there's a lot of folks that there's a lot of confusion about that. It's like, well, I'm going to go to the private school, but I want to keep my IEP. You can keep your eligibility. That eligibility might not change, but the services and everything that was going to be provided by the public school, that will significantly change. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that, Doreen?
The way I sort of explain it in one sentence is that private school students do not have an individual right to special education services. School districts have an obligation to spend this money, but the students don't have an individual right to special ed services.
Perfect. So when we talk about parentally placed, that's what we're talking about, where the parents have chosen to enroll their child in a private school or decide to homeschool them. As Doreen mentioned, homeschooling is the same as being in a private school in the eyes of the state. And so there's some things that still remain in place for the school, and that is child find obligation. School districts have an obligation to locate, identify, and evaluate all students that are in their jurisdiction that might have a disability. And so they should be in communication with the private schools in their area to say, hey, if you got somebody on your radar, please make a referral to us, kind of a thing, and putting out child find materials. We'll see that in a lot of early childhood programs. We might see that poster, but there is an obligation. So even if you're homeschooled or in a private school, your child can still get a free evaluation through the public school if the IEP team meets after a referral and says, yeah, okay, we want to go ahead and evaluate. So child find would still apply. And again, we mentioned the student may be able to get a service plan through the public school. So I actually just attended my first private school service plan meeting about a month ago, and so it was very similar to an IEP meeting and yet very different, because it really that particular district said our service plans are all we do is speech, that's it. And so, and this was a student that had a lot of needs in a lot of areas, but the conversation was kind of shut down because all we do is speech. So we're going to focus on, you know, delivering the speech services. And so again, if your child is in private school or homeschooled, they're not being served under an IEP. They may be getting services through a service plan, but they're not being served through the IEP. And the 504 plans, when you think about a 504 plan, and that's for those students that are just getting accommodations and not specially designed instruction, private schools do not have to follow a 504 plan unless they're getting some federal money. Anybody that's getting any federal dollars, even if it's just one, then they would have their obligation under Section 504. But we do see a lot of private schools might call it an accommodation plan, or some, you know, students maybe are coming with a 504 plan, and the teachers and the staff are still making those accommodations for those students. And so it's just, you know, something to think about. Things will look and feel differently than they were for your student when they were in the public school. I pulled up an example of the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction Exceptional Children's Private School Services Plan, or PSSP. As you can see, it looks very, very similar to the IEP forms, and it has a lot of the same fields. But again, if it's something you're thinking, you have a kid with an IEP and you're saying, hey, I might want to, you know, homeschool or private school, and I might want to look into one of these plans, it may be worth reaching out to the Exceptional Children's Director or the central office to say, hey, how does our district serve students on a services plan? Is there, you know, is it just one service, or do I have an option? And maybe there's some out there that are doing all kinds of things, but my experience is I haven't talked to anybody yet where they were getting anything other than speech therapy. Have you, Doreen, ever seen anybody get anything besides?
Yeah, I have, but it's not common. You know, the districts have to submit a plan to the state to have it approved, saying this is how we're going to spend the money. You know, they can set their priorities, saying this is our target population. If we still have money left, then we'll move on to this group. And if we have money left, then we'll move on to that group. I mean, basically, they stop when they run out of funds. So even if their target group has more students in it than what they can serve with that money, then at some point it's okay, money's gone, that's that, and they get to shut it down. Years ago, I heard about some kid that was getting occupational therapy from a district that I know right now basically does not do that for anybody. So I don't know if there was some extenuating circumstances or if it was a kid, and I can honestly see how this could work. If it was a kid whose category was speech language impairment, but they also had some oral motor need or something maybe that the OT, you know, was addressing or something, you know, possibly they may have worked that in as a related service to the speech therapy, but rare and far between, so I wouldn't count on it.
Yeah, yep. And Doreen, you actually already covered this slide about the homeschooling.
Yep. So
and now we are going to pass the reins. And I'm going to mute myself.
All right. Thanks, Amy. So again, my name is Tiffany Jada, and I'm with the SEAA. We'll leave off the NC to make it a little shorter and easier for everyone. What our agency does is we help the state pay for education. Our agency has been around since 1965. When we first started, it was primarily about promoting access to higher education and helping administer financial aid for students planning to go to college. But we also collaborate with other organizations, and we do a lot of work with the online platform called cfnc.org. And this is the free service that North Carolina provides in collaboration with College Foundation to assist students in planning, applying, paying for college. That's the moniker for that. And SEAA also administers the K-12 programs that we're going to talk about tonight to assist families that want other school options and want to have their student attend either a private school or a homeschool. Can you give me the next slide, please? Thank you. Okay, so our agency offers 3 programs that help expand school choice for students, eligible students in grades K through 12, the Opportunity Scholarship, the Disabilities Grant, and the Education Savings Account. Now, the Opportunity Scholarship is the program that's designed for students that meet the household income eligibility guidelines. And whether or not a student is eligible for the Opportunity Scholarship is not relevant for that student to have an IEP. It's strictly based on income. On the flip side of that, the Disabilities Grant and the ESA are designed for students that have an IEP, but income is not taken into consideration. So Opportunity Scholarship equals income eligibility, Disabilities Grant, ESA equals special education via an IEP. And for the Opportunity Scholarship, it does require the student have prior enrollment in a North Carolina public school. And that requirement is for students entering grades 2nd and up. And this eligibility is based on the spring semester prior to being awarded a scholarship. So an easy way we like to term that for families to help them understand at the time of the application they're submitting, where are they enrolled in? Are they in public school, or are they in private school, or are they homeschooled? For the Disabilities Grant, that prior enrollment eligibility, that prior enrollment, it is prioritized by students that are currently in public school. So while students that are already enrolled in private school can apply, the priority is given to those students that are in public school and want to transfer to a private school. And for ESA, there is no prior public school enrollment requirement. So come on, come all for ESA. And as the ladies mentioned earlier about the requirement for non-public education not being an obligation that private schools have to apply, we try to stress this with families. Children who are placed in a non-public school by their parents don't have a right to receive all the special education and related services that they would receive if they were enrolled in a public school. So likewise, a private school doesn't have a legal obligation to provide those special education and related services to students with disabilities. We encourage parents to select a non-public school carefully and just reach out to that school to find out prior to enrollment if that particular school is going to meet their students' educational needs. Okay, so we'll just stay on this slide right here for a few minutes. Again, with opportunity scholarships, eligibility is based on income, and it's not specifically for students with disabilities. And I'm sure everyone has heard the news in the last couple of weeks. For this year, with the passage of House Bill 1105 that the General Assembly just passed and the governor just signed for the Opportunity Scholarship, the current application is still open for families that want to transfer students beginning January 2021. So if you're still looking for school options, you may know of a private school that may still be accepting students. The Opportunity Scholarship is still available. You just want to keep in mind that any award offers made, they won't be effective until January 2021. We will still have to look at your student's prior public school enrollment, which will be where the student attended school in the spring 2020 semester.
Tiffany, I once talked to a mom a couple years ago, and their kiddo received both the Opportunity Scholarship and the Disabilities Grant. Is that still something that can occur if the family meets the income requirement, that they can apply and possibly receive both, or is that not common?
Oh, yes. We actually have families, if they meet the income eligibility requirements, the student gets offered an Opportunity Scholarship. The student has the required document from the IEP. They could also receive the Disabilities Grant and the ESA. And we actually do have, it's a small pocket, but we do have students that receive all three funding sources. And also along with the lines with the new legislation passed for the Opportunity Scholarship, the household income eligibility guideline was changed, and that'll be effective for spring 2021 awards as well. So we're kind of busy right now with the new changes. And we plan on getting those new income eligibility guidelines published by the end of this month. And we hope to start making those awards for spring 2021 early November. So those are in the near future.
Did they lower the income? I hope so, based on a lot of folks' working situation has changed. Did they lower it, or did they raise it, the income requirement?
Well, they raised the maximum amount that a family can make and still be considered. So they raised it.
Okay, gotcha.
And actually, Tiffany, hot off the press, we just published those guidelines today. So I'll put the link in the chat.
Okay.
But you're right about the timeline for the other things. It'll be well into the fall, end of November at least, before those awards are made.
Okay. Okay. So some information you can go take a look at for the Opportunity Scholarship if you think you may qualify based on the income. And for the 21-22, it sounds so weird saying that, for the 21-22 school year, those applications will be available for all three programs February 1st of next year. Specifically for the Disabilities Grant and the ESA, you'll want to apply by March 15th. Because those two programs have limited funds, we typically don't leave those two applications open any later beyond that time. So March 15th will be a date you'll want to stick in your calendar for Disabilities Grant and the Education Savings Account. For the Opportunity Scholarship, the priority deadline is March 21st. That application will remain open, but families that apply before that priority deadline will have a better chance of getting in the lottery and possibly getting selected. And for the Opportunity Scholarship, the awards will be made for the 21-22 school year starting in April, for awards that will be dispersed in August 2021. Can I get the next slide, please?
You want it to be on Disabilities Grant or the Education Savings Account?
Education Savings Account.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And again, just like the Disabilities Grant, the ESA, as we like to call it, it doesn't consider income, but the students have to have a current IEP. And again, that prior public school enrollment is not an eligibility requirement in order to be considered for the Education Savings Account. Currently, for the Disabilities Grant and the Education Savings Account, the applications are closed. But because of that new legislation that was passed, we're in the process now of ironing out all the details. If we're able to go back after we've evaluated our current wait list of students. There's a possibility, not saying it's definite, but if we have to open the application back up at that point, we would.
And Tiffany, just for clarification for the Disabilities Grant and the Education Savings Account, folks have to have documentation that shows that their child was found eligible for an IEP. They don't actually have to have the full IEP created. They just have to get that, we used to call them, there was DEX. Is that correct? You just need that formal documentation that says the student has been found eligible for an IEP?
Right. What we usually like to let families know is the specific document, the section out of the IEP that we're looking for is the eligibility determination.
Okay.
And yes, that should it has to say that the student, based on all the testing that's gone on with the IEP team, that the student is eligible for special education and related services.
Yeah, it's actually, eligibility in most districts anyway, is determination form is a separate form than IEP. They may sort of package them together, but it's a separate form. And some districts have gotten to the place where they'll find the kid eligible and then basically ask the parent, do you plan on getting special ed services? And if the parent says no, they don't bother to write the IEP. So, those parents are going to have one piece of paper, but not necessarily the other. Whereas in other districts, we'll sit there and go through the whole process, write the IEP, and then ask the parent for consent for services. So that plays out a little bit differently, but clearly they have to be eligible, but they may or may not have an IEP if they indicate that they're not planning on having their child there.
Right. And I just want to put out there, it doesn't happen often, but the Foundation of Disabilities Grant and the ESA, the student, per that eligibility determination, it has to say the student's eligible for special education services. So if a parent goes through that process and the IEP team deems the student not eligible, they can't be considered for the Disabilities Grant or the ESA.
I helped a mom last spring, and she had been homeschooling her son for quite some time, and he had received one, or I don't know if it was the ESA or the Disabilities Grant, but he was due he needed current paperwork to reapply. And somewhere in some small print when she and I were looking, is there a provision still that folks could, if they can't get it, the IEP, is there something where they can get something from a licensed psychologist or something, or am I imagining stuff?
No, that's true. Once a student is offered an award and has actually used now this is a catch, they have to be offered the award and they actually have to use the funds for at least one semester. So they either have to have money go pay tuition at a private school, or if they're homeschooled, they have to be using it for qualified expenses. If they've used some of the money in a school year, they can either go back to the public school and get that eligibility determination, or they can use, we have a form that we give parents. They can take that form to a psychologist or a psychiatrist licensed in North Carolina. And after that provider does their testing, they would fill out our form and the parent submits that in lieu of an eligibility determination.
And so that would only apply to folks that have already at one point were found eligible for an IEP? It wouldn't be anybody new to the realm?
Right.
It'd be a reevaluation.
Okay.
Right. This is a student that's active in the program, meaning they're actively using funds. Yes.
And that was kind of the situation. The mom was like, I've been homeschooling for so long. The public school hasn't laid eyes on him. This is his senior year. I just need to get through this, one more year kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. And then COVID. And so it was going to be quicker for her to go the private route than the school route anyway. So I just wanted to, in case folks needed to know that. That's all.
Yes. Okay. All right. And that is all I have. Just a reminder that, again, the disabilities grant and the ESA applications, they're going to be open February 1st. Actually, all three program applications will be open February 1st. And again, just for the disabilities grant and ESA especially, make sure you apply by the March 15th deadline and get that eligibility determination document in. The application can't move on in the process without that document being submitted.
Okay, and I've got a question just for my own clarification. It seemed that when they first came out with the disabilities grant, which was the first program, that the money was being allocated more or less first come, first serve based on having, completed application, been found eligible, et cetera, et cetera. And then now I'm just watching the chat there. It looks like there's a lottery process for all three. Is that correct?
Yes, now it's transitioned to a lottery process for all three programs, yes.
I've got a question too, but I'm going to launch a poll while I'm talking because I forgot. I made 2 polls and then I always forget to launch them. But just curious about the audience to see how their child or where their child is enrolled right now, whether it's a homeschool, your traditional public school, a charter school, a private school, or if your child's not school age. Tiffany, the Education Savings Account and the Disabilities Grant are both applicable to parents who homeschool, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. And then, so if they were to receive that grant, I know they can use it like to purchase curriculums. I thought I saw on one of them at one point about like educational based therapies. Is that right? Can they use that money for that, or how does that work? What all can they use the money for if they receive the award?
Yes, and I don't know, Catherine may be putting a link to that document in the chat, but there are, and Catherine, correct me if I'm wrong, there are
Sorry, I was typing something I didn't hear. What link do we need? Because I'm on it.
Qualified expenses document.
I think I did.
Oh, okay.
Let me go back and double check.
Okay. So while Catherine's putting that in the chat, there are 8 categories of qualified expenses that the disabilities grant and the ESA will cover. Because these programs are the same yet slightly different, the way they use the money for them is a little different. But if the expense falls under one of those categories, yes, they could use disabilities grant and or ESA funds to pay for those purchases.
So if a parent is enrolling their child in the private school, does the funding go directly to the school? Or does the funding go to the parent and then they pay the school, or how does that work?
Well, we've got about 500 some odd schools, I think, that participate with the K-12 programs. So If the school is on that big list of participating schools we have on our website, the money would have to go to pay tuition first. And I think there is a slide back, I can't remember which slide it is, when you talk about students being able to receive more than one K-12 funding source. If you have a student that's receiving all three, there's a method to the madness. Opportunity funds have to be used at a participating school. So all that money would go to a participating school. Disabilities grant, the money could be used for a student attending a participating school, or they could be homeschooled. So in that case, disabilities grant money would be dispersed to the participating non-public school or homeschool. And then ESA is, for lack of better terminology, is parent controlled. So those parents actually have access to an electronic account where they transfer, they have the option, they don't have to, but they can transfer ESA monies to a participating school for tuition.
Got it. So I see on the poll, we've got about 11% of folks present are homeschooling, 57% have their child enrolled in the local public school, 9% in the charter, 6% are in a private school, and 17% are not school age. So thinking about those kids that aren't school age, I know that for all, or most, or if not all three of the programs, there is a requirement that they have been enrolled in the spring semester of the public school, except, isn't it except for those folks that are just starting kindergarten?
Yes, if a student is entering kindergarten, they don't have to meet that requirement, correct.
Gotcha, okay. And I'm going to launch my other poll, and it's just kind of polling the audience to see if they had known about your programs. As soon as I say that, first I got to find it. I'm sure I created it, just where did I put it? And I know that we have a lot of questions in both the chat and the Q&A. And so I don't know if Doreen or Catherine or Tiffany, if there's any that you see that you're like, oh, I want to do that one.
I've answered a few that relate to our programs. I did not try to answer any that are more your area of expertise. So there are some there that I'm sure you all would be better.
I lied. I created a poll, but I must not have saved it. Oops. Okay, Doreen, did you happen to spend any time in the chat or the Q&A?
I'm looking now. I wasn't following the Q&A because I sort of pulled that all the way up. Some of the chat questions I saw as they were popping up.
I see. I'm going to answer some of these. Is this specifically addressing school services during COVID-19? No. This just happened to become a hotter subject or a hotter topic during COVID-19 as parents were getting frustrated and wanting to know what other options they had. What's important to know is that if your child is doing remote learning or virtual learning, even though it feels like homeschooling, you're not homeschooling. Your child is still enrolled in a public school, but receiving their instruction remotely. And so the timing was right to do a webinar for folks that are wondering about their options. And so we kind of did a webinar last week called The View, where we talked about school services during COVID-19, but we know that a lot of folks have a lot of concerns, a lot of frustration regarding the services that their child is or isn't receiving remotely, or maybe what they're receiving isn't working. That's the sort of thing where you could call myself or Doreen or another parent educator, and we can kind of help you maybe explore options on how to get that resolved. I have one child that attends a private school in Craven County. She has an IEP, and she is in need of academic and psychological testing and tutoring. I heard NC is not serving private schools with tutoring services and is not testing at this time. I know the public school must provide services to private school students with IEPs. How do we receive services, and when can we expect IEP services to start, and how do we move forward to honor her IEP? They are
Okay.
serving private school students, but
Well,
not through an
that's
IEP.
hey, Amy. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
gonna say that's the thing is we can stop there. Is there should not be an expectation that your private school is going to be honoring an IEP. They don't do IEPs, and the private school is not going to provide that comprehensive array of services. Even if the child is served on a services plan, it's going to likely be a more limited array of services. So you kind of can't have it both ways. You can't have the full benefits of having an IEP and have your child in private school at the same time. But you would be,
Yeah, so if your child was found eligible for an IEP at one point, and it was time for a reevaluation, you could contact, again, there's that child find obligation, you could contact your local school district and say, hey, I'd like to get her reevaluated. What's important to know when you think about reevaluations, the bulk of a reevaluation process for IEP eligibility is reviewing the existing data. So it doesn't mean that folks are automatically going to redo certain tests and assessments. And so I guess one would wonder why do you need this information, this new information? And maybe if you don't have a service plan in place now, just saying, hey, I understand that this might be available. How does Craven County School District use their funds for students enrolled in a private school? And if it's speech therapy and your daughter, maybe that was an area of need, that might be something you can get. But the chances are most folks are doing things remotely, and so it may be remote speech therapy. But it's something, we could, if you wanted to give us a call, we could help you, draft that letter to see about getting that ball rolling.
Yeah, well, one thing that anybody who's listened to anybody ECAC talk long enough, you've heard us say that the answer to most questions about kids with disabilities is it depends. All these little variables matter, all of it does. And so, again, if you're looking at a specific situation, then you probably do well to just kind of call us and we can sort of work through how the things play out for you and help you come up with a game plan.
I started homeschooling in August, and I'm wondering, how do we know what we should be covering regarding curriculum if our student isn't at grade level? I'm definitely not qualified to answer that.
If you're homeschooling, either the North Carolina Standard Course of Study, as in the grade level standards, are available online. So if you just want to know what's expected of kids at each grade level, it's there. But there's no requirement that you deliver any particular curriculum or teach your kid anything. Homeschoolers, you own that. You own that process. There's stuff that can help. And again, I know for a while there was information on that North Carolinians for Home Education site about homeschooling students with disabilities. So there's, clearly a population of kids out there that aren't necessarily going to be marching lockstep like everybody else in terms of their academic progress or social emotional progress. And you may find some things there that might be helpful to you. But there's, in terms of, like I say, what should be happening at a grade level, you can get the grade level standards from the Department of Public Instruction's website.
Who should parents contact if virtual learning is just not working for a young child? There is no teacher, but a TA is handling virtual learning for now. The TA is a new hire and doing her best, but does not know child development, about options to try or data collection. First of all, let's just say God bless all the teacher assistants out there, because they are awesome, and they often don't get enough credit for what they do. And at the same token, if this is a child with a disability that has an IEP, it would not be appropriate that the TA would be delivering specially designed instruction to this kiddo. And so this is something we would definitely need more information, and we know schools there's always been a shortage of school psychologists, related service providers, exceptional children's teachers, and there's even more so now. As folks are, have their own dilemma of having children at home, or, being high risk or medically vulnerable and not wanting to return to the classroom. And so that is something that if this is a student that has an IEP, where it may be, if they don't have the staffing right now, when they do, maybe compensatory services might be a conversation worth having to see if the child can get what he or she is missing. I also have another child in public school and is falling behind in her classes. I hear that kids with special needs can possibly attend 4 days a week when and if we return to school in October. How do we address this and be sure to have this opportunity for our kids that need it? That's kind of the tricky thing right now, is because each district or local education agency is doing things differently, and some of them it's like it's changing by the minute. But I have heard that. I have heard of a lot of districts for their exceptional children are trying to do what they can to get those children to receive in-person instruction as much as possible. And so it's, you know, you can ask for anything. You can ask for the world, but it may not all be doable right now under the current conditions. So, you know, reaching out to your district saying, I heard this, and, you know, I do feel that this is not effective for my child, the current learning environment. You know, is there something that I can be doing in the meantime, or what is the timeline on this? Or can we add some more supports while we're doing remote learning? Can we maybe create a contingency plan that has some additional supports so that my child's not falling behind?
Yeah, those are kid by kid decisions until it becomes a universal thing. And so certainly if your child's not benefiting from the remote instruction, you want to give voice to that and document it, you know, so communicate with your teacher, with the school principal, find out what adjustments they may be willing to make. It could be that there's some changes that they can do to actually make it work better for your kid. But like I say, district by district is doing things. So it's not going to be a one formula answer to say, you know, take this step here. There are some districts that maybe even in October are not going to be doing any in-person instruction at all. But some of them have been willing to make adjustments, again, on a kid-by-kid basis. I personally know a family where that's the case. Most of the kids are coming in 2 days a week, and the parent was able to successfully make a case that her kid needed 4 days a week. And so, you know, they're coming 4 days a week. So again, but you want to document what the problems are, make, you know, your requests. You may be calling an IEP meeting if need be to talk about what those needs are. But it's not going to be a one size fits all kind of answer there.
Do you attend or assist with IEP meetings as advocates? We do attend and assist with IEP meetings, but not technically as advocates. Our role as parent educators is really to give parents the tools and the information and the resources so that they can advocate for themselves and their child. But certainly sometimes we do attend meetings, and we're actually able to do it more so now that meetings are happening virtually. You know, we've got 100 counties, and there's only 8 of us parent educators. And so we don't attend every meeting. We really need to have a good idea of the current situation, what's been tried, what's working, what hasn't. We need a copy of that current IEP, and really need to have a clear understanding of the desired outcome. So yes, we do attend IEP meetings and assist folks, but it's not our primary role. Hopefully we can get everything into your hands so that you can do it without us. So it's really what we're about. We want to empower families, but certainly, yes, we do. And again, what's important to know is everything that we do for families is at no charge.
Well, and Amy, I'm going to try to clarify that just a little bit, because I would say that we are rarely able to attend, because the proportion of folks that contact us and say, hey, I'd like you to come to a meeting versus the ones that we're able to go. I mean, we could go do nothing but IEP meetings and would only touch the tip of the iceberg. So there's just, you know, it's close to 190,000 kids with IEPs. And as Amy said, there's 8 of us. So, you know, the math just doesn't work for that. And as a parent training information center, that's not our primary charge. You know, our charge is to, again, make sure that parents have the information that they need. So it does happen, but it happens rarely. So I don't want, you know, folks to hear this and have the expectation that, oh, I can call and these things are going to happen. You know, we will provide as much individual assistance as needed, and that can take all kinds of forms. But, you know, again, because you guys are going to be there for the long haul, and so us sort of sashaying in and saving a day isn't necessarily going to help your child long term. You know, we want the parents to have the skills to be able to do this today, tomorrow, next week, next year, you know, and so forth. So.
I live in Mecklenburg, and my daughter has autism, and she is 3.5. I want to move to Cabarrus County. Should I stay here based on what would be offered to my child for schooling? I'm new to Charlotte and a mommy with autism. And so,
Call us.
yeah, call us. Well,
Yeah,
and
that
based
one's
on your
good.
child's age, if she's 3.5 and if she has an IEP in Mecklenburg County and you transfer to Cabarrus County, in North Carolina, students that transfer from one state local education agency to another, that IEP should easily transfer over. And especially now with the state's ECAT system, they should be able to go in there and just easily transfer over, that she should get the same services that were offered in CMS should carry over to Cabarrus. It should be, you shouldn't lose anything.
And I will say that's based on normal world. You know, we're in COVID land. So if those two districts are in different places in terms of what model, if one's at, what do we call it? Level ABC, plan B,
Yeah.
C, whatever. One's at plan C and the other's at plan B, that may not walk over, you know, because if your receiving school district is not doing any in-person learning and the other one was, they're not going to all of a sudden open up a building just for your child. So that's a little tweak to it. But generally speaking, you know, the rule is that, you know, if you move, even if you move from another state, a receiving school district has to provide comparable services based on IP that the child comes in with.
Do all schools have autism services? So all public school districts have to, they have that obligation to provide that free, appropriate public education, and they have to provide a continuum of placement. But not every school building has to have a program specific to students with autism, but the district as a whole does. And so when you think about if you have a kiddo, the placement requirements are that the district would first look at the school that your child would attend if he or she did not have a disability. And if that school doesn't have a program that would meet your child's individual needs, they would look at the nearest school in the district that does. But, you know, all schools, you know, we'll see some of the larger districts, you know, when you look at the EC staff, they'll have very specific, you know, this is our behavior specialist, this is our autism specialist, this is our, you know, we've got some folks that, you know, the literacy specialists, things like that. Some of the smaller districts, you know, you might have somebody that has dual roles, but all schools, especially with autism being so prevalent, all schools should have somebody on staff that is equipped to serve that child.
All right, the question about way to get standardized tests. Again, if you're going to be homeschooling, then I'd refer you back to that North Carolinians for Home Education, because they do have information about how to access the tests because they're required. You're not required to do benchmarks, you know, but once a year they have to be given an achievement test. It's not going to be the school system's EOG. It will be a private testing. You know, Iowa tests of basic skills or some other kind of tests. It could be a Wilcox-Johnson. There's an array of tests that meet that requirement, but it's not going to be the test that they use in the public school. All right, test is 5 years old, currently public school. Not really.
I read something about this, and for some reason, I think it's in the Compulsory Attendance Law statute. I think that you do, because if that child's enrolled, they're still keeping attendance, but then I don't know if they're required to report the attendance because the kid's not 7.
Well, yeah, I was
don't
gonna say
know.
not really. They're not required to be in school. So why would you be required to register as a
Yeah,
homeschool?
that's true.
So now if you're wanting your child to get any services from the public school system, then they have to be a student somewhere. So in that case, you would have to put them in a homeschool. But if you're just kind of hanging out there educating your child, doing, you know, what it is that you feel they need, they don't have to be registered or enrolled in any school until they're 7 years old by law.
As a parent who will be relocating to North Carolina, I hear you spending a lot of time on private schooling for special education kids. Am I to assume that the public school system doesn't serve the special education kids well enough? Where can I find info for public schools? No, definitely do not assume that. That's not true. This webinar was really just about folks that were exploring their options, because we've seen an uprise in people wanting to know what else is out there. But certainly we have wonderful, wonderful districts, wonderful EC staff and administrators across the state. You know, my kids, I got 3 kids, they all went through public school. My son had an IEP from the time he was 3 till he was 18. and they served him very, 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 very well. And so that is not the message we're trying to send. Again, it was just we were starting to see more and more interest in wanting to know what was out there, and we just wanted to get the information to families so that they can make an informed decision. And so that they know, if I do this, I might lose that, or I might not get this, or it's going to look a lot different. Or if I want to do this, there's programs out there that can help me afford to do that kind of a thing. But no, there's so many awesome districts doing things really, really, really well. And so don't let anything that, just that we're talking about, it doesn't mean that we're saying, here's what folks should do. It's just saying, here's what's out there. If you do it, here's what you need to know, sort of a thing. So,
Amy, this is a question that will kind of answer her question. Do you have access to the chat, like a transcript of the chat stuff after the webinar's over?
Yes and no. I'm supposed to. Zoom allows that, but sometimes when I go and get them, it doesn't give me everything. So I'm in the Q&A box. I don't know that it'll give me the Q&A. I could maybe try and copy and paste it if it'll let me.
Okay,
but
yeah, because she's asking about these links.
Chat it does. I don't know about Q&A.
Yeah, because we got all of these. I think most of the links that, Catherine, you were putting out there, you were putting in the chat. Is that correct? Yeah, so maybe.
I did put out the website because ultimately all the links that I put
there
out
too.
they're all on the website. So if you go to www.ncscaa.edu, which was in the chat, just bookmark that one site and you can get to everything else.
Yeah. So in the follow-up email that comes out from Amy, we'll be sure to include that, make sure the website's there.
Yeah, just the main website, and then
you can move around and find everything
K-12
else.
and you can go from there.
Does being enrolled in a public pre-K program count?
That's a follow-up to something else, and I'm not sure if we're because there was another question I think up there that this person asked, and that was.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
I wasn't sure, so I didn't address that. I wasn't.
Yeah,
sure.
I was gonna say I wasn't sure what that meant. Pulling out, do you have to register? No, and that's where we're back to that thing. Is no, you can pull your kid out of school and homeschool them, and you don't have to register as a homeschool. You just do what you do. They're not required to be in school.
Since COVID caused a lot of parents to make tough decisions without this information, do you think there will be any assistance clauses provisions for this year until things go back to being a little more normal? The district wasn't very informative, so unfortunately we switched to homeschool from public school because it wasn't the best choice to have my daughter learning virtually. She had an IEP, and we do not want to lose her eligibility when we return. The eligibility should not be an issue when she returns, I would think. Correct?
Generally, eligibility lasts for 3 years. Kids have to be redetermined eligible every 3 years. If they have a category, I'm trying to look back at that one. Did she say how old a kid was? Doesn't say. If we're looking at a child who was eligible under developmental delay, and they were younger and now they've aged out of that, because developmental delay you can only keep up through age 7. So once they have that 8th birthday, they automatically are no longer going to be eligible under that category. So unless you're dealing with that kind of scenario, then the eligibility lasts for 3 years. You don't have to have an active IEP for them to remain eligible.
How can we find the specific private schools that accept students with the specific disabilities? And in that follow-up email, I can put the direct link. I can't remember if that comes up as a spreadsheet, but I can make sure that that's available.
Well, but what
and there's kind of like a spreadsheet that says, opportunity scholarship, disabilities grant, education savings account, so people can kind of see who takes what.
Okay, yeah, but what I'm hearing in this question is certain disabilities. So if she's got a child with a learning disability, which schools specialize in that? Which school serves kids with autism? And that list isn't going to do that. But what the list will do is narrow it down so that you're not looking at schools from all over the state. You find the ones near you that are on the column as saying that they accept the disabilities grant, and then you can contact those schools and just ask. And if they're specialized, you go to their websites and it'll, should be pretty much emblazoned over there as here's our target population, this is what we do. But it'll narrow the number down so you're not having to sort through, hundreds of them.
And there's no guarantee that because the school participates in the disabilities grant or ESA that they'll have the services that you want.
Correct.
So it depends on
Correct.
what you need. So it'll be up to you as the parent to have the conversation about what your expectations are and be clear about what the school is able to provide.
Yeah, ask good question.
What about if transferring with an IEP from a public school in a different state? For students that transfer from out of state to North Carolina that had an IEP elsewhere, the school has an obligation to provide what we would call to provide comparable services to what they were receiving. And so we've had, some folks come here from another state and feel like they hit the jackpot. And then we have some say, you kidding me, this doesn't feel comparable at all, but they have to offer comparable services until they develop and create a new IEP for that student.
Okay, now let me flip that question to if this person is asking about them having access to these grant programs and such, do you guys recognize or honor an IEP from a public school in another state, or does it has to be a North Carolina IEP or eligibility established in North Carolina?
Right.
Is that correct?
Right. It can't be from another state. So the first order of business would be to visit the North Carolina public schools.
Okay.
If a child is in public school, is there a time frame for the new school year's IEP meeting to take place and be implemented? If that child had an IEP, it should be implemented and in place for the first day of school if they already had one.
But it wouldn't require a meeting every year.
Right.
So, IEPs have to be reviewed at least once a year. So depending on when that last annual review was, it's going to happen by or before that time. The IEP, the services should be implemented right away. You don't have to have a separate meeting each year before kicking it off. They sort of pick up where they left off with the service. Now this year we got a funky little thing happening because of the COVID and the fact that most of the school systems are not operating as normal. Is in a lot of them, it's not required, but a lot of them are offering what they call remote learning contingency plans. Some of them call it something a little different. It's, what we saw this other one, online instruction support and services plan, it's different titles. They are creating plans that basically describe what's happening and what services are being provided to the child under the present circumstances. And in some cases they'll say, okay, we're currently at plan C, but they'll also specify what it will look like when they get to plan B, so they don't have to have a whole nother meeting and develop something different. But if they know that the child is getting services that are very different from what's specified on the IEP, those are the districts that are more often than not going to be having these meetings to create another plan to bring it into alignment, because otherwise they're more or less out of compliance if they don't have anything that says what they are doing, and we've got an IEP that they're clearly not, following correct. So that's why the majority of them are going to do these temporary, these contingency plans, because it kind of covers them in terms of saying, yes, we are trying to provide free, appropriate education to the child. It's just going to look different right now than what it was before.
Okay, last one. Some other states provide special education services until the age of 22. In North Carolina, do all services end at 16?
No.
Nope. That's some misinformation. It is the same in North Carolina.
Yeah, students are entitled to FAPE, as in their free, appropriate public education until they either earn a high school diploma or they age out, and aging out means, they have a right to attend school through age 21, which means up until they turn 22. And even if they start school at age 22, they can finish out that school year. So they may have a birthday partway through and will be able to continue as a 22-year-old. They're not going to be able to start a school year as a 22-year-old. So I'm not sure where the 16 came into play from the point of compulsory education. They're required to be in school up until they're 16. So maybe that was a little confusing.
I am going to try and copy and paste the chat box just in the event that when I go to retrieve it from Zoom, it's not all there. And I see Holly, I recognize your name because I think we're in a lot of the Autism Society Facebook groups, and you are just a strong advocate for your own family and others. I always see you putting really good information out there. But I see that she wrote in here, what if your child is in virtual school and the student has not been put in an EC classroom virtually and the IEP has not been followed since the beginning of school, and we have been in school since the middle of August? That is a problem, should not be happening, and certainly would be a conversation to say, I need some compensatory services for what we missed, and I need something in place going forward that's going to provide my kids with some meaningful educational benefit.
Yeah, I mean, certainly go on record with, documenting that concern that these things haven't been happening. Your child should have a special ed teacher, and if they've got a teacher, then that would be, the first point of contact, find out why, this stuff isn't happening. If they haven't been assigned a teacher, maybe they moved from elementary to middle school and nothing's been going on, then you contact the principal. But you're still going to follow your normal advocacy steps in terms of, chain of command, start with where the problem is and work your way up as needed. But do keep documentation and record of the time and the dates that these things did or did not happen. So if your child is not gotten services for today, tomorrow, the day after that, so you have a record of that, how much time they actually did miss of instruction.
Well, that is a wrap. We had a great turnout. We had great questions, great chat. I am so thankful to Catherine and Tiffany for joining us on this webinar. I think that you guys gave some really, really important information to families and gave them some more tools to add to the toolbox as they think about, what's going to be best for their family. We'll send out the follow-up email that will include lots and lots of links to what we discussed. Tony, our administrative assistant, she's the one that will send that out. So we'll gather those links. Hopefully we'll have that sent out by Friday. And she also sends out a survey. So if you get that, if you don't mind completing that, because we are federally funded, they like to know what we're doing and see how we're doing. And so please complete that. It won't take too long. Oh, Allie. Hi, Allie. I love Allie. I recognize a mom's name in here, another awesome mom. So thank you all for hanging out for us tonight. And again, if you didn't get your question answered or you have a specific situation that you need help with, call us. That's what we're here for.
All right. And Catherine, Tiffany, I want to say thanks especially too, because I learned some stuff. And when parents call us up with those questions, then we can make sure we're giving them good information. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Good. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.